Okay, friends, we are going to try to do just some basic algorithms just to get your guys' brains thinking through this. And we're going to just start on easy because I think that that is very okay. So we've already done this one. Let's try this one. Simple array sum. So I'm going to do this in JavaScript, but I don't know how JavaScript right there. Perfect. Okay. Something to note is that this stuff is just already built in. So you don't have to mess with any of this. This is just uh, stuff that is handled. I think that way this can operate in a specific way. Really, all you're doing is complete the sum array function below, which it looks like I already did, but let's just do that. Cool. So we have this. So function simple array. So what it's saying is, given an array of integers, find the sum of its elements. Now, anytime you hear given an array, that just means that's really sort of code for your function is going to take in, it's going to have passed to it a parameter of of an array of integers. So given an array or create a function that takes in an array. Those are all sort of keywords just to say you're going to have a parameter. You're going to be given, your function is going to be given this value here. So it's just saying, for example, if AR is 1, 2, 3, comma 1, that if that is your array, then what we need to return is the number 6, right? So if we're looking at this, complete this editor, it must return the sum of an array as an integer. Has the following parameters. So R is an array of integers, meaning that we're going to call it R. First line contains an integer n, denoting the size of the array. The second line contains in space separated integers representing the array's elements. Cool. So it's going to give us some sort of array, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 11. And we need to output the sum of that. Okay, so here we have our function. We're doing this. What is the first thing you guys can think of that we should do, right? We want to find the sum of this. What are some things we're going to want to do? We're going to pseudocode, and then we can kind of go from there. I'm going to do it in this versus doing it because Copilot will do it for us. What are some things that we're going to want to make sure that we have access to and do?
Loop through the array.
Yeah, so I'm going to need to loop through the array. And what am I going to do as I loop through it?
Adding those numbers together to a sum.
Yeah. So do I already have this sum?
No, you'll need to make one.
Okay, where am I going to make that? At the top of my, once I enter my
outside of the
loop?
loop.
Outside. Yeah, exactly. How come?
Otherwise it won't save, I think.
Yeah, so if I
keep looping over.
Yeah, it'll keep looping over. If I were to set it, like if I were to say, let sum equal 0, and all of a sudden it's in my loop every single time, it's going to just reset it to 0. So I'm never going to have that value. Perfect. So then I'm going to create this variable called sum. This is our pseudocode, right? I'm just writing down and thinking through, what am I doing? Well, first off, I need to create a variable, a sum variable. Then I need to loop through the array. And I need to add each number to the sum. And then once this loop is done, what am I going to do?
Return the sum.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So let's do that. So first, I'm just going to say let sum equals 0. Now I'm going to do my for loop. So I'm going to say for let I equals 0. I is less than r dot length, right? Because I want to go through the entire thing. And then I'm going to say I plus plus. Oops. Right, I just want to increment I. Cool. So now I am incrementing through. Now what do I want to do? This is gonna loop, but how is this gonna specifically loop? What does 0 represent here?
The value of I.
The value of I, and what is I representing? Like, how am I gonna use this?
We can use it as an index.
Yeah, exactly, as my index, right? So I'm gonna say something like sum equals AR of I. So whatever the value at that specific index is, plus sum. So I'm resetting my sum and saying it's sum plus this new value. I guess you could have switched it. Doesn't matter. They're just math, right? You can do either one. So this is going to go through and it's going to say, okay, as I is 0, it's going to go into my array and it's going to find the value at position 0. And it's going to add it to my sum. So in this case, let's say it's 1. It's going to say 1 plus 0. So now sum is 1. It's going to go up. I becomes 2 or 1. Sorry. Then it's going to say, okay, R of 1, which is our 2. It's going to say sum equals 2 plus whatever sum was. It was 1. So then now sum becomes 3, and it keeps doing that all the way until it reaches the end of my array. Now, the last thing I need to do is I need to return sum. And that's it. I have created our sum variable. I'm looping through the array. I've added each number to my sum, and then I've returned my sum. So now what we can do is we can run code and let's see. It's processing. So we passed our sample test case. Cool. Expected output. Now, if we submit our code, we have test case 0. We want to pass all of our tests. Test case 1. Cool. So we passed everything. Great. So this will work. So congratulations, we solved this one. So it'd be success here. Any questions on this? Any questions at all? Okay, well, let's go try another one. Let's see, compare triplets. So Alice and Bob created one problem for HackerRank. A reviewer rates the 2 challenges, awarding points on a scale of 1 to 100 for 3 categories: problem clarity, originality, and difficulty. The rating for Alice's challenge is a triplet. So A equals, and then it's a tuple of A of 0, of 1, and of 2. And the rating for Bob's challenge is triplet B of B of 0, 1, and 2. The task is to find their comparison points by comparing A of 0 with B of 0, A of 1 with B of 1, and A of 2 with B of 2. If A of I is greater than B of I, then Alice is awarded 1 point. So if A of I is less than B of I, so, in this case, if we're comparing 0 and 0, if A is higher, if this value is lower than this value, then Alice gets a point. If this value is greater than this value, then Bob gets a point. If they're the same, then neither of them get a point. So comparison points is the total points a person earned. Given A and B, determine their respective comparison points. Okay. So they're going to give us something like this, just 2 different arrays, array A and array B. So for elements 0, Bob is awarded a point because 3 is greater than 1, right? For the equal ones, which is 2, right? These are equal. So then therefore they are awarded 0 points. And then finally, for this one, Alice receives 1 point. So they return the array of 1 to 1 with Alice's score first and Bob's second. Okay. We get that. So complete the function compare triplets in the editor below. Okay. Anybody have any questions on what exactly we're doing here? I'm gonna get rid of that. Any questions? Okay, so where would we start here? What are we gonna do here? So what is A and B?
Alice's and Bob's score,
Yeah, right. And those are
or
arrays.
yeah, they're arrays.
Yeah, they're arrays, right? That's what they told us they're passing in. Okay, so we need to know what we're trying to do is we need to compare the arrays. So we're going to need something to compare them. So if we're iterating through, we're going to use something like a for loop, right? So I need a for loop through the arrays to see the values. Before I do that, what am I going to need to do? What is the information I want to keep hold of?
Both of their scores.
Yeah, exactly. So I need to create a variable for Bob and Alice to keep track of scores. Perfect. So I'm going to have that. I'm going to loop through when I'm looping through, what am I going to want to do?
Compare
Mhm.
their scores.
Yeah. The score for Alice to the score for Bob at the given index, right? Just like we did in the first one. And then I can say based on the comparison. I want to award 1 point to the winner. Perfect. So once that's done iterating, I need one more thing. How does it want us to return the array or return the values? In an array, right? So what I can do is I need to push the total, push these scores to an array with Alice first, then Bob. And then lastly, I need to return the array. Okay, so we have quite a bit that we need to do here. So first and foremost, I'm going to say let Alice score equal 0. Let Bob score equal 0. Cool. So I've done, oh, dang it. Sorry, I keep, just have it. Okay, so I let Alice score is 0. I've created these variables so I can keep track of the scores. Now, we are assuming, and this is something that when you are dealing with, when you're thinking through, like in you're talking through this, they're going to ask you, are there any sort of questions that you might have? Can anybody think of an edge case that'll kind of break this and kind of make this feel weird or make this not work correctly? Any sort of, it's called an edge case or something that
If
could
there's no
potentially,
value. So
if
if one
there's no
group has a
value?
score and the other group doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Like if there's an incorrect, right? And then, so that's something that you would want to ask in your interview. You'd say, is it okay to assume that they're always going to have the same amount of scores? Right? They're all, so that, or is it okay to assume, or are the arrays always the same length? Because what will happen is sometimes they're not, right? And so if that's not, then I need to handle if the arrays are different lengths. And so in an interview, you're going to ask that, say, okay, if they, are the arrays always going to be the same length? And if not, how would you like me to handle that? And they might say, okay, return a message that says, can't do this because we'll just say that that's what they said. You know, I want you to return a message or a string that says arrays are not the same length, can't compare. So if that's the case, right, that's the first and foremost, that's an edge case. It's a great job, Robert. That's an edge case that we just want to look at. Then we can say, okay, before I do anything, I've created Bob and Alice, but even before that, I could say if a dot length. I need the parentheses, sorry, it's Python writing. Does not equal b dot length. Then I want to return the arrays are not the same length. LENGTH cannot compare, or however they, however they want you to word that. Cool. So we want to do that before we even create a variable, right? Because we don't want to take up space. We don't want to have our computer take up the time creating a variable and then find out it's not even working. We want to do that first and foremost, right? If they're not the same length, then we have an issue. Or they might say, we want you to handle it in a different way. If it's not the same length, go ahead and award, whoever does have a score, let's just pretend that the other person just got zeros, and then we'll award that to that person, right? And it depends on however they want you to do it. That's how you do it. So you always want to think through that stuff first before you even start writing code, because you want to say, okay, how do you want me to handle this? Okay, this might be an issue, right? And so you want to handle, they're called edge cases, or things that are kind of anomalies, or what could break your code, right? And unfortunately, life is not perfect. Data is not perfect. Oftentimes you're not going to get the right stuff all the time. And so you say, okay, how do you want me to handle that error? Okay. So we have this. This might actually break this. So actually, I think it'll be fine unless they are different lengths. So when we're going through, as long as that's not true and it doesn't say to handle it the other way, yeah, I think we're fine. Okay. Great. So now, we'll put that right here. Cool. So we've handled our error. We're good to go. So we've created our variable. Now we need to iterate through. So I'm going to say for let I equal 0. I is less than, and for right now, if we're going to assume that they're the same, right? Because if they're not the same, then we're already going to kick it out. So you can just pick either one of these. I'm going to say a dot length, because then it's going to at least get all of them. And then I plus plus, meaning that we want to increment up. Okay. So we're iterating through. Now, what do I need to do? We want to do it the long way. We want to make sure that it's, we're checking and seeing.
An if statement. So
Yeah, an if statement. So what am I going to say? If what is our unique case going to be? Because I have 3 different cases, right? Either it is greater than, it's equal to, or it's either, if it's greater than 1, then we can give the point to Alice. If Alice is greater, but if they're equal, then they get, no points. So what we could do is we could say something like, kind of doesn't matter, I guess, which format we put it in. We could say if A of I is greater than B of I, then I want to say Alice score plus plus. Right, I'm just going to add 1. Then I could say else if and then it could say A of I equals B of I. Then we could say something like continue. Continue is just going to say, okay, just go to the next iteration because we don't want to add any points. And then else meaning that Alice is not better and they're not the same. Right? What that just means is Bob score plus plus. Cool. So this for loop is going to iterate through, and again, because we're assuming they're the same, because we already have this edge case here that handles that. We're saying, all right, if Alice is greater than Bob, if that value is greater than, then Alice gets a point, just point, or plus plus equals just one, right? So it's going to take this value. This is shorthand for saying Alice score equals Alice score plus one. That's just shorthand for saying that. I guess I'll write that. Else if, so that's not it. So let's go to the next one because we want it to also break. So we want to make sure that these are all within the same condition, because if this is true, we don't even want it to read that, right? Because this is all one conditional statement. If any of these two are true, it doesn't even read the else, or it doesn't read the else if this guy's true. Cool. Else we're saying, hey, if these are the exact same, I guess we could do a triple equals because we should assume, but I'm not going to assume. That'd be another thing too, right? It's like, are these guaranteed all going to be numbers? Remember, if we do a double equal sign, it will compare, even if this is accidentally a string, but it's the number two. But as a string, it'll still compare the two and they'll still give us that. But if I do a triple equals, then that's saying that not only do they have to be the same, but they have to be the same data type. We're saying if that's true, then continue. All continue is going to do is it's going to skip everything else, which is just this else. And then I am going to add one. And I basically am going on to the next one, right? Going on to the next iteration. We could have done that with this, it doesn't matter really the order here on how we do these. And we could have flipped Bob and Alice. It doesn't matter. Cool. So now we say, great, this is all done. I'm still within my for loop. Okay. Once I'm out of my for loop, well, I need to return an array. So what I could say is I could say let ARR equal blank. Then I could say ARR dot push Alice. I don't think I can do, let's see. Can I push multiple variables to an array? I don't think so. Maybe I can though. Who knows with JavaScript? You never know. So what I'm wondering if I could do this comma Bob score, if I have to do this and then do it twice, basically. It's like, push Bob score and return ARR. I'm also wondering if I could do is just say,
Yeah, it looks like you
Return.
can just put the item one comma item two.
that's what I thought, that you could just do this. I'm wondering if you could just do something like this. We'll test it after. I would think you could do that. You're just returning an array of that. And then we don't even have to have this push. And we don't have to have this. We just do this. Screw it, let's test it. Worst case we fail, and then we do the other one, right? Okay. So we've iterated through, we've done our comparison, we've added scores, and then now we are returning an array of my scores. So let's run our code and let's see. Cool, passed both sample cases. Looks like we can do it in the way that we did it with this guy. So you don't even need that. So let's submit our code. Passed all 7 test cases. We are good to go. We crushed it. It's like, I don't need this. and I don't need this. Okay. So a little bit higher level. Anybody have any questions for this one? And it's 450, so that'll be our last one. We won't have time to do that. Anybody have questions? Anybody see a way that they could make it faster or better or anything like that?
I just did else a index I is not equal to B index I. So like
sorry?
if they're not equal, then Bob's score goes up one.
Oh, cool. So instead of even having this, you just had this. Else. Did you do an else if?
Yeah, else if.
Else if. And then you, this is where you pass in. You said A of, oops, A of I does not equal. Yeah, because then you wouldn't have to go up. There you go. Oops, I have a space between mine does not equal. Issue, cool. Yep, so we even just crushed that. So we can say exactly this, right? Where it's saying if it is equals, then it doesn't do anything and it just iterates through, which is fine because that's what continue was doing, right? It wasn't doing anything, wasn't adding anything. So here's just saying, hey, as long as they're not equals, then we can just iterate this score. And if they are, then it continues up. So yep, this is a way to refactor this to make it even faster and more efficient. Cool. Really cool. I wrote it a long time ago. Let's see how bad this is. Oh, I got rid of it. Bummer. Okay, well now we have a more efficient way to go because I think I had quite a few else ifs. I don't remember the last time I did this, but. Any questions on these?
If you ever do get stuck, is there like the solution somewhere or?
So yes and no. There's some YouTube videos where I think people go through and just do like one every day and then they just post those. You can go to submissions and so here's my submission. Oh, 2 years ago is when I did it. Okay, this is early in my, let's see what I wrote. Yeah. That's funny. This is when I was learning like a walker is like whenever you deal with linked lists. That's very funny. This is one way I did it. Yeah. I guess that technically works, but that's not all this extra code. Funny.
I had a mentor I was talking with, and he was talking about the difference between really verbose code and really truncated code. And there's a term for it. I don't remember what it is, but it's definitely a telltale sign of like a new developer is using really, really long code instead of like, oh, that's like 3 functions, and you just put it on one array. It's just like
Yeah.
dot map, dot filter, dot splice,
Yeah.
and then it's just like bam.
Yeah. No, that's true. You get used to knowing what map is, and then even just like what we did, right? Like here you could tell I was learning 2 years ago, I was learning about like linked lists. That's why I had a walker and I used a while loop. And now I'm like, I would never do that. I mean, we made it way faster. To answer your question, Michael, if you go to this and you go to discussions, oftentimes people will put their answer here. The only thing is this is in C#. And so you kind of have to, okay, C#, okay, Python 3. So here's like a super truncated version. There is a sense though, just to be super transparent. This is fast or it's truncated, which is great, but there is this balance that you want to have readability as well, to where if you can have this really, short but complex, nuancy library that you're using, maybe the speed is faster, but then the argument would be like if somebody is trying to help your code or rewrite it, then it doesn't really like, and they have to go look it up. It doesn't really make sense. You do want to have it to where at least you can readability is an important thing. But yeah, if you come here, then you could see a lot of people. So like a week ago, somebody did it this way. And so, yep, so they did count because they assumed like this isn't a dynamic piece, right? So interesting. This is like a, it's funny because this is like not super advanced, but they're using a ternary operator right here, right? And the return point, but then this is just assuming that it's all three. And so ours, I would say, is actually like we could implement this, sure, but ours is more efficient than this, which is kind of interesting. So you can just see people's the way that they did it. And it's a great way if you're like, oh man, I'm trying to do this and I do not understand. Yeah, so this is kind of what we did, but this is in Python. It's kind of what we did, but they added that third else. But as we saw, we don't even need that. You don't need an else here. It just goes back up. So that's how you would do that.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Well, cool. I'm going to stop the recording here.